And time to call to order the commissioner workshop for today. We begin with the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I am Mary Ann Burr, the commissioner for Board of Coupeville, District 1.
John Mashasik, present for District 2.
Martin Van der Pass, present, District 3.
Well, today is our workshop day, and we are working on long-term strategic planning. I had an idea to give a little forum to this meeting. I was thinking, if you agree, to give each commissioner a maximum of 20 minutes to present their each idea, plan, concept, where each of us could present, and then take questions just about what we've said. And after we've all done that, and we all have an idea of what each other is going to talk about, then we could move into a more general discussion.
Could I ask one question?
Sure.
Did either of you make a list of things that you think you would want to have as a strategic plan?
Yeah, I have things I want to talk about, yeah.
Okay, I got a big long list. As soon as she said that, I'm like, okay, talk fast.
Well, I have mine as on a single sheet of paper. So I think I ought to come last in case other people go over their 20 minutes, but holding to a maximum of 20 minutes
Yeah,
is a good way to start.
well, I can see that you have a lot of ideas and we have ideas as well, so I think to make it some fairness in terms of time.
Right.
You know, like you shouldn't, just because you have a lot of ideas doesn't mean.
It doesn't mean they're good ones.
So we shouldn't get
Right.
to talk about our ideas, so
Yeah.
Is there any
in a
way-
balanced way, you know. Can you pick your favorites?
Yes.
So is there a way to see that we have shared, commonality?
Well, maybe since we have fewer, probably, we can go first.
Yeah,
And then
I'll
you'll
check 'em
know
all. I'll
if
check 'em all.
that ours are shared and you can adjust your list. 'cause I'm
But
sure
it's
some of ours are.
important that we start with basic ideas and not have a domination from one long list. Because it will be very difficult to juggle all a mixed bag.
I mean, why don't you go first with the basics?
Well, I don't wanna go first
Oh.
because I'm not gonna take my 20 minutes unless other people have questions, and I
Yeah.
think it's possible that it's appropriate that my idea goes last,
Okay,
because it's simple.
okay,
But why don't we let John go first and see how far he gets through it, and after we've each had our opportunities, if we have extra time we wanna give to John, we could do that at the end if he's really strong in wanting to have, I see the yellow page is full.
well, I mean, my mind went through the process of saying, what do we already have projects? And maybe a little bit of we're trying to determine is where does that project stack up compared to another project in terms of resources?
Well, why don't you just start?
So like the mooring dock, the floats on the mooring dock is obviously a project. Should it be the number one project or a project being worked on simultaneously?
like
Because
how do
projects take like
how
sometimes
do we
5.
prioritize our
Right.
projects? We don't really have a framework necessarily.
Well, that sounds like a good beginning for your list.
Right.
We've already got that.
So mooring dock,
Mhm.
But are you talking about developing a framework for how to prioritize the projects?
well, yeah, because
Coming up with
one of my
that.
thoughts is, how great is the need? And how great is the difficulty in doing it, permitting, funding, staff time, things like that.
Yeah,
So all of a sudden, maybe you end up with projects that are easier to do, but maybe not as high a priority, but you can get them done easily
Sure.
versus projects that, are just gonna be difficult from permitting, funding, staff time. But they gotta be done,
Yeah.
like the mooring docks say. So at some point, I think that's what we're trying to work towards. And I'm thinking that the reason we're having this meeting is as we are kind of wrapping up the Save the Wharf project.
Yeah.
Which has got people happy that we've saved it and we're wrapping that up. Now, where do we, put our resources? I think that's why we're having this meeting.
Well, yeah, that's different than what I thought. I thought this was a general future of the port. What are we going to do in a more general way?
Yeah, that's one.
This is very specific, what you've been discussing, which in my mind would come after we had already decided what is prioritized, and I don't hear that. I hear that's I'm very happy that you have thought this through, but it seems a little detailed for this particular meeting. Because we haven't decided that what we want to do is focus on what started rather than what will happen in 2028 when the money doesn't come anymore.
Well, I think as a board, this will be operating at that 30,000 foot level. That's where
would
we
you
gotta get
expl-
ahead. We gotta
Would
get
you,
ahead.
would you explain that, please? You've used that 30,000 foot level several times and I'd appreciate learning more.
It's saying that, we're thinking, into the future. We're, an interface between the public, knowing what our, voters and taxpayers are concerned about. And, we're kind of nudging the process to go in certain directions as opposed to other directions.
Well,
And obviously, Save the Wharf is a big one. Because, the many years of, paying off the farm, there wasn't money to quote, do any work on the wharf. But the people were upset that we weren't working on the wharf. Paid off the farm, redirected the money and effort to do the wharf. But now that saved the wharf. Is the community sitting there going, what now? What might you be hearing, or you might be hearing from people? Though again, we're invisible to so many people.
So rather than focus on specific projects like the dock, that's kind of like part of the wharf. I think what I'm hearing you say is you don't want to use this meeting to talk about individual projects, but more like overall strategic direction. Should we focus on the wharf? Should we focus on the farm? Should we focus on our reducing funding and how to accommodate having enough budget in the future? Should we merge with other
Do we want to
ports?
try to expand our tax district?
Right.
well,
Or
these
is that
are,
a
these are,
pointless process?
these are big ideas rather than individual things. It's
Yeah.
what I would like to talk about today is big ideas. But knowing that what's ongoing already is in fact ongoing.
Yeah, within the Save the Wharf project, there were 10 other projects, the envelope, the cap and piles, the roof, and yeah, so it's like.
So, mine have a kind of a wide, the access road off of Juan Road is a project, but it's being worked on. So you can kind of see that Chris is ahead of the curve on that, acquiring, making that road that's getting all muddy back to, where the one Willow Farm guy goes back there. That's a project. It's ongoing. It's probably got a completion date, in our lifetime.
Yeah, hopefully in the next few months.
Yeah, so, there are projects that are just, we're like, keep it going. But, at some point, there's gonna be something, caretaker cottage. But all of a sudden, it's gonna be a little bit bigger. How are we gonna get that revenue back on the caretaker cottage land that we used to get every month, and now we're not?
I'm wondering if you could combine all these project ideas into a bigger idea. And that these would be subheadings under your big idea. It sounds like your list was a great list. But it's things that have already started rather than thinking about what the port wants to be when these things are completed or not, because we decided along the way that these individual projects weren't worth it. Do you have an idea about, I know you've mentioned the term economic development a lot. And I'm wondering if that fits into your plans for the big future of the thing. And that could be a heading somehow of your ideas. I'm just trying to help.
I know. So I hear what you're saying. So are there broad categories like maintaining revenues, increasing revenues for the
Those
port?
could be big.
Are there ones that are like maintaining jobs that the port's already facilitated, or new jobs in the community? But part of me is also like looking out there and, like, what are the things our community is, really, bashing around, and you can kind of see in the headlines, the county, affordable housing, things like that. And so the caretaker cottage kind of fits in under affordable housing.
So is affordable housing one of your big categories that you would like to see the port involved with in the future?
I think it's a community need that, where we may not solve it, but we can nibble at a little portion of it with the caretaker cottage, or that mysterious 5,000 square foot building that at one point supposedly got approved with a second story, so it'd be 10,000 square foot altogether.
But I'm terrible at interrupting. I'm
That's
very
okay.
sorry about that. But I'm thinking what you're talking about now are the details that will go underneath a category
Right.
of affordable housing being a concept that the port wants, that you would like to see the port involved with.
Well, do we,
Then the details would come later.
So
But
do you-
affordable housing is your category that you waved the flag for. Is that true? And.
yeah, you're looking for broader categories like
Yes.
economic development.
Yes,
What else?
I feel like if
I
we
don't-
all list 10 projects, like maybe we should repaint this under here, we could all list 10 different projects, but if we don't have a framework for deciding which projects are better than others, we're just gonna list 30 projects and then nothing's gonna happen at the end of this meeting. I feel like this meeting is more for setting the compass of the port of like, which way are we headed? Are we headed towards affordable housing? Is that something we wanna prioritize and direct our efforts there? Are we headed for, do we wanna?
Jobs, living wage
Sure.
jobs.
Do we wanna just live within our future reduced budget and try to maintain all the properties we have, which I think is what you're gonna say? Or do we wanna, invest in agricultural infrastructure and go after grants and staff training for that
And you
and
just-
support our farms?
Touched on something that, I think is driving my interest is, the cost of living, the need to be able to pay our staff, competitively, provide health insurance. I don't know that our rental lease income is gonna keep pace with what Endurus is doing to us. You name it, that if we don't have new revenue sources at some point, then we're gonna be financially behind the 8 ball. That's my concern. And I think my entire life, I've been busy as hell with my businesses. But anytime I could catch my breath and kind of look around the corner and say, is that what I see coming towards me, a train or something good? And so I think I wanna see this opportunity is for us to stop and look around the corner and say, what could be good, what could be bad, bad to avoid, good to grasp and try to be ahead of the curve. So I think
See-
I'm hoping that dialogue. Cause I think as commissioners, we're supposed to do that high level.
Well, I
Yeah.
wanna see, I wanna know what you see when you look around the corner. What are the big pictures you see when you look around your corner? And you're a detail guy, you're a get it done, down on the ground kind of, this needs to be done. And, that's what I'm having a little trouble with, because there's so many things to think about at once. I'm hoping that, it seems to me like we're having this discussion before we're having the presentations of everybody's ideas, because you have so many. I don't wanna cut anybody off, but I want to see if you could somehow categorize the long list you have into a fewer different ways to go, or are they all fit into one? They may all
Like
fit
if you
into
think
one.
increasing new avenues of revenue, creating new revenue opportunities is important
For the port,
for the port.
right,
That can be
as
a
a
thing.
can, as a
You don't
can,
have to dig in anymore. We
right,
can then we can have staff look into it. You can work with staff,
It-
brainstorm some ideas,
Yeah,
see what's feasible, bring an idea or two to the commission and say, I think this is a good idea, this is what we should do. But I don't think we can do all of that right now.
but see, I think that's stepping back from our obligation that we were elected to be community leaders. Which is to say that, we are gonna give direction to say to staff, jump to the right versus jump to the left.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking
I
about.
thought that's
It's like come up
what
with a
just said.
direction, a high level direction to give to staff and tell them what you want them to do.
But at some point, it has to be specific.
Yeah, but not at this point.
not today.
We
Why
can't
not?
just, well, because there's too many, what do you want me to say? Yes, we should look at new revenue. Yes, we should remodel the caretaker cottage and we can probably put 4 apartments there and. Or no, like, we don't have enough information to make that decision. It needs to be explored a lot.
For me, what I'm saying is that we wanna make sure that's on the lists of projects to be worked on. And then at some point, we're gonna be saying, what's the status of that project? Right,
Well, yeah, it's sounding to me like your overall general idea is to have a list and deal with them in whatever order they demand to be dealt with. Is that correct? I mean, you have a variety of projects that you see need to be done. And you were thinking that today we would be deciding to do them in a particular order. But they all fall under the category of individual port projects rather than an overall goal for the port. Am I making any sense to you?
Yeah, that's why I thought you should go first. Cause you're just gonna we're just
Well,
gonna
I
keep going
think-
back and forth until.
Well,
you say what
actually,
you wanna
I
say.
would like to be, but what I say depends on what you say.
We don't need.
And sort of, because mine is kind of a tie it up in one basket and think about this thing.
see, cause I kinda.
So could we put just a pause on, unless you have some finishing remark to make?
Well, I think what triggered this meeting was, I think I asked the question, should the port be chasing BEAD funding for another broadband project?
Yeah,
And I think the reaction to that was like, well, should that be activity by our staff to do that versus something else? I mean, that's where it has to drill down to details, or semi-details,
yeah.
because some of it's like, just to explore the information and then maybe come back and go, ooh, too much money, or,
Yeah,
like dredging or, at the wharf.
so how many individual things do you think are on your list that you wanna kinda just get a quick up or down vote from us to see if staff should pursue them or not? Is that
Oh,
what,
I think
Well,
it's too soon
well-
to,
Yeah,
well,
or just like if we wanna look into something or not?
yeah,
We can tell Chris, this is our last broadband project, we're not interested in any more broadband projects, and that could be the
Yeah.
direction we give Chris. Or we
Right.
can say, we might be more interested in looking at that again, if you find opportunities, bring them to the board.
right.
I think that's jumping a little bit fast.
To decide if we should do
I don't think
broadband or
that
not.
we should be making any decisions today. I think we should be exploring today.
Okay,
And in answer to you wanting me to go first, I will, okay, I'll do it.
There you
Because
go.
it won't take long.
yeah, I think we should try to get through the things that are
Let's
easier to
just
get
do
through.
my 20 minutes,
Sure,
because look at that, it's 10:20. It's time anyway.
there you go.
All right, I'm going to read it first because I prepared it so I don't forget anything. I have printed copies, which I will give you after we've had our talk so that you can look it over.
Okay,
Simply put, my goal at this time is to have success with the levy lift so that the port can survive and has the capacity to achieve future goals that the voters support. My basic analysis of our most recent quarterly profit and loss document, the one we just got on Monday, clearly shows that the current regular levy plus rental income is seriously inadequate to pay even the payroll plus payroll expenses. I've been working since I was elected to describe my goal in a way that's easy to understand and indicates that I am in favor of additional projects that will enhance the service that our port can offer the public once they are supported by regular port income. I propose that we must decide that our first goal must be to understand the current distribution of our general income to support maintenance and operation once the IDD levy ends in 2027. That tax money will be spent or assigned to rehab projects not completed yet. One of the numbers we need to estimate, I'll take questions at the end.
Okay.
One of the numbers we need to estimate is the cost of rehab projects at the farm that exceeds IDD funding. I included that because I've been told there isn't enough money coming in to do everything. In other words, what will we have to work with in the future? As John has said in the past, this port needs a basic business plan. Until the IDD revenue came rolling in, our port had been living hand to mouth since Greenbank Farm was purchased in 1997. That 20-year debt, combined with the small original levy set at formation and the shrinking of the dollar value, resulted in the continuation of deferred maintenance, which finally the IDD levy is able to address. We need a business plan to move to the future possibilities of our port. And that plan's success is dependent on having enough income to support it. I think we need to start working now to determine how much of a levy lift we need and whether or not it would be permanent or relatively short term. Let's do the research to see if we can even continue to support current operations with a levy lift. We need to decide what would have to change if there is no levy lift. The voters need a clear choice. Continue to support the now rehabbed port and get ready for future opportunities, or let the port operation and facilities just start to decay all over again. We need to ask the voters if they want to support the port and its future. It's up to them. Not just whoever gets elected as commissioners. Yes, we may consider ourselves the leaders, but we must remember our fiduciary duty. The voters are in control, and it's our responsibility to understand completely the consequences of leading down a primrose path that's happened in the recent past. And I'd be happy to, and hopefully be able to answer any questions.
I like it. I mean, I like what you said, because that strikes right to the heart of port finances as a category. Right. Of the financial viability of how, cost of living or the increases of endurance, utilities, staff compensation is eating away at it. And yet, because we don't have a business plan, we don't know that our lease raises are actually keeping pace with these increases that are coming down the pike, whether we want them to or not. So the business plan concept is a specific thing that you're saying we're missing. I agree. It's different than a budget.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
In what way is it different than the budget? Cause it's multiple years into the future?
Yeah,
Looks
yeah,
forward
it's
5
almost
years
like
or
a
something?
pro forma statement where you're gonna say, let's look at 3 to 5 years instead of just 1 year chunks of budget.
Mhm.
And you can be, lose money 1 year, but make it up another year, and
Yeah.
things like that.
I think given that our IDD funding is sunsetting here. I know,
Yeah, not
there's a
really.
possibility of extending or renewing it, and I know you don't support that, I'm not trying to get into that
It
debate
isn't
right
a
now.
question of support, but I'll have my turn when it's my
Okay,
turn.
I'm just saying that given that our current budget is not. May or may not reflect our 2 years from now budget, and
Right.
probably won't, you're talking about a different way of raising more revenue. That's fine, let me finish my sentence, I'm just trying to say that I think more than a 1 year budget planning process is probably in order, so we can map out our future capital finance plan and what we have planned over the next 5 years, and look at our currently committed funding that we have coming in, and see where we're gonna be in 2 or 3 or 4 years, instead of just where we're gonna be at the end of next December.
We've already agreed, the 3 of us, we need a business plan,
That's the business plan, I think
Yeah.
that's a great idea.
which is specific.
But I wanna know how much money we have, because that's rather basic to a business plan.
Yeah, we can have different different forecasts, if we redo the IDD and achieve that, this is what that would be, if we
Yeah.
get a levy lift, this is what that would be, if we don't, this is what that would be.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, okay, now I will throw here is the RCW for IDDs. And one of the, at the bottom of RCW 5336-100. The first levy by or for a port district pursuant to RCW 5336-100 after April 1, 1982 shall not be subject to RCW 8455-010, which is the additional voted IDDs, which Port Townsend has been, and I keep asking for our own legal person to interpret this.
Yeah.
But I know Port Townsend had an election for a second IDD because they had done their first in the 1970s,
Before that,
way before 1982.
okay.
Our first collection was in 2022, which is clearly at the last minute.
So can I just,
Sure,
it sounds like
What's the
you
bottom
have
line?
skepticism that it's legally possible.
That's
And we
right.
need to get guidance from
Yes.
legal experts to
That's
find out
right.
if that's true.
That's what we need to find out.
So
I don't
all
know,
in
I'm not a
agreement.
lawyer.
we need
if that's
to,
even an
If
option.
that's even an option,
Because that would be an alternative to a levy list vote, because it
Yeah.
would be a vote on another.
exactly, either way, we'd have
So,
to
either way,
vote and we might not get it, and it may not even be possible.
right, either way, my goal is to involve the people at the polls to
Yeah.
see if they will financially support any additional funding for continuing. I mean, we've got the facilities with the IDD.
Yeah,
But they're just gonna sit there if we don't have money to operate and maintain them. One of the mistakes that I've made, lots of people have made, you buy something new and think it's all done. And you forget
yeah,
the regular maintenance of whatever equipment is you bought.
that road's being worked on 20, 30 years from now, it's gonna need to be replaced again.
yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
and you need to be ready for that.
And there's definitely no law that lets us do a third levy, or a third IDD, so if we're relying on IDDs to replace our roof, then maybe that's not gonna work in 30 years.
But it would only work if the people approved it at the polls, because the second one is voted. We were.
That's actually not correct.
Hmm?
It's not correct. The second one goes through the same process as the first. If the community, the constituents, go out and get, I forget what percentage of signatures that they are opposed to it, then it goes on the ballot.
I see.
If they don't, then it just passes. Yeah, and that's what happened with Port Townsend. Someone tried to rally the community, they got the necessary amount of votes, it went on the ballot and it passed anyway.
They got the necessary signatures.
I'm sorry, I said ballots, the necessary
They
signatures
got signatures,
to get it on the ballot.
cause they didn't want it to pass.
Because they didn't,
The people that were, you gathering.
either they didn't want it to pass or they wanted everyone to vote on it,
They
who
just wanted
knows?
it to go in there.
Yeah,
Whatever
Yeah.
it is, we need to know that it's an option for us.
And that's-
Before we
yeah,
worry
that's-
about the details.
Yeah,
And that's gonna be relatively easy, you know, we get our attorney and let them research it and MRSC and we'll know the answer to that.
and then that can feed into the business plan options
Right.
of, is that an
Yeah.
option to go after that or not?
I mean,
And-
that's a really easy thing.
Yeah.
That's easy.
And,
It's a
We've
yes or
achieved
no.
something. We've achieved something today.
yeah,
It's
Yeah.
good.
right,
That-
and we drill down to detail.
Okay, yeah,
And it could be the business plan is gonna say to save the port financially is gonna be part resolving the IDD, partly having new revenues, partly this, partly that in the business plan,
yeah,
that it won't be all one silver bullet.
Mhm. See, when I said what would have to change, I actually just did a brainstorm and made a list of about 10 things that might have to go if we don't have more money. I know John has brought up to me way back when John wanted to know if it's possible to sell property that belongs to the port, and the answer was yes. And so that is on the list of things that might have to change, along with reduced hours of operation, reduced staff. There's so many things that would change if we don't get more income. And if it's put to the people, presented in a way that here's your choice, people, do you want to continue supporting the facilities we've all just paid for to rehabilitate? And look to the future. You see, we've never had a reserve fund. They're literally hand to mouth. And so if there was money being put aside for future opportunities,
or roofs.
Or roofs.
well, right, if
That's
there's
right.
not enough money to do all the work, well, people, it's gonna take some more, and we'd have to decide how much more, and if we wanted only enough to finish the projects, or more, whatever it is, whatever we've come up with, I really want the people involved, and I want the board involved with enough time to promote public involvement so that they understand what they're voting for. if it goes to, I mean, if we decide to make it some kind of a vote, that's all.
So having had this initial roundtable, we've decided economic development is a broad category. And economic development, to me at least, means living wage jobs and workforce housing.
You mean it's a category that we've agreed
A
to
broad category.
prioritize, or it
Well,
is
we
a
brought
category?
up the economic development as something the port's responsible for, right?
That we would wanna focus on that as one of our priorities.
Well, that's in our comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements, it's almost in our mission statement, so saying that we're focused on economic development is really a moot point. It really should be, what does that mean? So what are the categories of affordable housing? You know, we're zoned to have 2 families live on this property. So that would be something, let's focus on workforce housing.
Right.
Workforce housing, right? The projects, my advice, I'm just throwing it out there, is you don't need to jump into the CRNM, the construction, repair and maintenance. That's what the executive director does, right? We need dredging, we need new roofs, we need this. That's not something the board necessarily needs to drive. And by the way, we're set for 2025, so this conversation, I imagine, is being focused on 26 and further,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, good. But those, you know, if you guys wanna list projects, that's great. But I think funding is a big one, the tax levy lid lift. I'll research whether we can do an IDD.
And some
Because-
projections
the
coming up,
projections,
with
right.
business plan or whatever you wanna call it. I don't like calling it a business plan, cause it implies that we're a business and we're not.
Yeah.
But
it's a strategic plan.
financial projections.
Right.
Operations plan.
In different scenarios
Yep.
of different funding sources
Yep.
and different expenses.
Those things are difficult to do, a strategic plan, you're right, I don't like a business plan either. A strategic plan is difficult to do if you are just guessing. And theorizing if we're gonna get a levy lid lift or not, if we're gonna get, you know, an IDD or not, that's really difficult. You can put a plan in place, if none of that stuff happens, the plan's out the window.
Well, yes, like there's scenarios.
Right.
Like how would we ask for another IDB if we don't have any plan of how we're gonna spend it?
Yeah, I'll find out first if we can do one. I was told we can by our consultant,
Yeah.
because we fall into a later set of rules. There's 2 sets of rules that govern the IDD, 2 sets of RCWs. I'll find out if we can do that or not. I'll validate that.
That will be very appreciated.
Yeah, no problem.
You see, part of the problem I've had is with our profit and loss statements. I went through the one we just got. And I just made circles around the grants and the IDD that were part of the first quarter report.
A lot of money.
And when I take those out, it doesn't balance anymore.
Yeah,
So I have to wonder,
I mean, I've seen
I
your
have to.
last 2 years of pie charts that say the same thing.
Right,
I agree.
but the simple way is just to look at them and take out the,
Yeah.
and I don't know how we're able to keep going when those funds are supposed to be separate, and I don't really wanna go there.
And there's a.
Because I think there's money being, I think there's money that comes in that's sitting, waiting to be spent on IDD, which helps things along. And I'm not sure that that should be happening. I know that it makes the financial statements say more than one thing depending on how we look at them, that's all.
Yeah, it's not operating revenue.
And from a risk management, we're experiencing the chaos right now of, you know, we're only a few layers of government away from Washington DC.
Mhm.
And look at the chaos happening, that grants could all of a sudden,
Yes.
that
Disappear.
if we've been counting on a certain numerical dollar amount of grants to balance our budget or do projects, risk management just went, you know, really, so how do we compensate and manage that risk by having more, quote, revenue that's strictly under our control at our environment of IDD or new sources of revenue, and not count on Washington DC to, you know, say, here's $500,000 to do that or do this. How do we take, you know,
That's-
control of our destiny?
Being creative enough to come up with something like that, I think might be up to What time is it? Oh, only one more minute and it's Martin's turn. Maybe he has, some ideas. Well, I know he has some ideas. It's yours, Martin.
Yeah, my main thing that I think we should move in the direction of is unsurprisingly supporting agriculture at Greenbank Farm in a more significant way than we do now. There's a lot of government-owned farmland across the country, and maybe ports, cities, counties own farmland and have various levels of what they do with it. But I think what we're doing with it, ours, where it's just leasing it at low rates and sometimes providing a gravel road to access it, is about the minimum that you can possibly do. And it runs all the way from the spectrum of providing a whole training and economic development program to help people launch new agricultural businesses, and providing buildings and infrastructure and markets to support those to incubate those businesses.
You actually have a project on that though, right?
Yeah, I've written 2 grants now for the port to develop those ideas. And we didn't get the first one, we haven't heard about the second one. It's a federal grant, so I don't know if it's even gonna be awarded or not, but yeah.
So the question, so those grants, do they fall under economic development or port finances or both? Do they create new revenue or
The
new
grant
jobs?
is new revenue, yeah, the grant is money that the port's getting.
Once the grant is, used
Yeah,
and then whatever it provided is operational, will that operational provide additional, income on a long-term basis?
no, grants are usually 1 to 3 years and then.
No, I'm talking about whatever the grant did.
Oh,
The
yeah,
infrastructure.
This is a
After
planning
the
grant.
grant is.
sure, leasing farmland can provide income, it already provides.
So,
income.
once it's been
Leasing these
improved,
facilities, but generally, sort of like the EDC's programs, they're trying to provide a service to these businesses with taxpayer revenue. They're not trying to extract money from these startup businesses to fund their programs or even break even. So, yeah, my vision is that we use taxpayer funds to develop and support agricultural businesses. So
So
we can leverage grants to launch and
yeah,
develop these projects, but yeah, it's gonna cost money.
but given that we don't have enough money to operate the port coming in right at this minute, based on.
We do have enough money at this minute to operate the port.
Yes, the financial income, profit and loss indicates, that the rents and the, levy alone don't pay the, payroll. So it's a tight squeeze to get everything done. Obviously, we're operating okay now and paying the bills fine. The port is also in an interesting, position of receiving its primary source of income, single source of income, which is the levy, just twice a year. So twice a year, oh boy, we got a lot of money. But
No, we budget for a whole year, we don't spend it all when we get it every 6 months.
I'm talking what it looks like, not what it is.
Okay,
And I've gone through, listening to this port, commission operate for many years. And I know that all commissioners, we have to think about who's gonna hold these seats. And which we will, with, whether or not, we have to make it as straightforward as possible. The more complex it is, the more screwed up it's gonna get. We're gonna have new staff, we're gonna have eventually new commissioners.
Yep.
And they will be responsible for carrying out, we hope, the wonderful, intelligent decisions we make here.
And can I slide in with?
Oh,
So I think what, Martin's reacting to is all three, it's like the blind men touching the elephant.
Mhm.
Somebody's grabbing the tail and says an
Yes,
elephant is a
yes.
rope.
Yeah.
Somebody else wrapping their hand around a leg, an elephant's a trunk, is a tree.
Mhm.
Somebody else has got the snout saying, no, it's a snake. So you're describing the finances a certain way. Martin disagreed, dying, no, we have, so we're all kind of holding the elephant in different ways and
Right.
describing it different
Good,
ways.
good analogy, because we see things from different angles. It's the
So,
same thing, but it doesn't look the same to all of us.
so at the same time, I'm always filtering like, okay, so this ties into this aspect, and so if we go for another levy lift or IDD, depending on what, we at the 30,000 foot level decide we should try to do first or second or together. It's all kind of, intersects that, we do need the voters to understand what we're capable of doing, and why they should check yes on the ballot instead of eh. So I gotta tell you, I attended the EDC chat put on by ARCIC.
Mhm.
We were invisible.
The port,
Yes,
yeah, we're not really participating in all these projects that are going on.
we have the pea patch, we have the hoop house, we
Mhm.
have One Willow Farm.
Yeah, it's 7
We-
farm businesses operating
And
there.
that didn't show up.
No, because the port's not really involved in any of it. We're just giving them a cheap piece of land.
Mhm.
But providing that land is a community benefit, but we're not getting a lot of yaha about doing that. And I was shocked that, Marion,
Mhm.
had good things to say about the Port of South Whidbey relative to agriculture, but not us.
Well, they have the whole fairgrounds building and they're Whidbey Island Grown and a bunch of food businesses are operating on the port's property and, there's, I don't know. I mean, the Whidbey Island Grown is facilitating the distribution for 50 to 70 businesses and
But how,
then the commercial kitchen they have, I don't know, there's a half a dozen other businesses that are operating out of there.
so they're getting positive PR out of that. Why are we so invisible here about?
Because we're not doing those things. We haven't even put a gravel road in so he can access his farmland.
But we are putting a road in.
We
It
are.
is a project.
Yeah.
We need to toot our own horn, cause that really burned my butt. When I listened to that whole presentation and we were just invisible.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the things that we could do that the community would be proud of and value, and I'm just getting shot down every time. Unless I can fully fund this program with outside revenue, nobody seems to have any interest, so it's like, and you're asking why people aren't grateful for what we've done already of just owning this farmland and letting people use it as is a requirement of our easement that this be used as farmland. We're doing the bare minimum. I don't think
Well,
anybody's gonna be proud of
And
that.
I'm glad you're the advocate for ag, for the Port of Coupeville. I see it as the pea patches, are providing, places for people to garden.
Yeah,
The hoop house, who was a lady that used to rent the hoop house for flowers? Remember that? It was like a few years ago, there was somebody had a business out of that hoop
yeah, I
house.
can't remember.
Which
the name
hoop
right
house?
now.
Which hoop house?
The hoop
We have
house,
4 of them.
one of them was like a lady that had like
Salty Acres,
a flower
which is-
business.
Oh, so you have Salty Acres up on the top with her hoop house and 1/10 of an acre.
Yep. So that's ag, maybe flowers, you don't eat them, but, One Willow Farm, is, people can buy chickens and turkeys and whatnot and eggs. So I think we're in the ag business. We're just not tooting our horn enough to say to the world, oh, by the way, you know, nice that, Port of South Whitby's doing agriculture. We're also doing ag.
Yeah,
What
I
is the
mean-
Port of South Whitby doing with agriculture, by the way?
The fairgrounds.
That's not agriculture.
I know,
Well, there's
but they-
agriculture, there's food and agriculture businesses that are operating in the space.
Right, because they have the commercial kitchen.
They-
Yeah, and that's where Woodby Island Grown does all its distribution. We've got all our water.
Sure, okay.
So, but yeah, it's not farming directly, it's.
Right, it's processing and.
Distribution, processing and
Sure.
distribution, yeah.
They, yeah.
But
So it's
we,
kind of the food system, it's not necessarily agriculture, but yeah.
so I mean, it's just like I said, this, lady that, works with Goosefoot,
Yeah.
was talking to Port of South Whitby.
And Marion, a big thing that she's been working on is building another commercial kitchen that can be rented.
Right.
That has been a Goosefoot project for many years, and they got some funding and they need more funding. So she's all about a rentable commercial kitchen,
Right.
so I think that's why she's really excited about what Port of South Whitby has, because they have one of those.
I mean, I'm
I think that the Green Bank Farm Management Group's control of the farm for 20 years set a picture of Green Bank Farm as a volunteer organization that was here to give things to people. And I think that picture still remains in people's minds who had been here for a long time.
Yeah, I'm trying to reset that image and not. But there's just a lot of resistance from people who have been here for a long time.
They think it's.
explain that a little bit more, because I mean, I'd be
Yeah,
supportive of that. I don't know that.
well, okay, yeah, I can. Read some more of what I prepared. Some of the things that farm incubators do, this is kind of a list of things that. Farm incubators, many of which are owned by government entities and taxpayer supported of in some way. You can provide low cost or free rent for land. Check, we're doing that. It's number one. You can help participants identify suitable land for lease or purchase. Sometimes they match landowners and farmers. Sometimes they're providing low cost or free access to equipment and tools, shared equipment, shared a tractor, tillers, other equipment that farms might not want to own individually, because those can be expensive. You can provide low cost or free access to infrastructure like walk-in coolers, barns, washing stations, hoop houses.
Oh.
Provide access to utilities like irrigation, water, and electricity. We are currently providing them with well water. We're currently struggling with the permitting of whether that's allowed or not. There's a pond that is supposed to be used for agricultural irrigation, but currently that system's, was waiting on a pond rehab for that to be.
Well, they can use that water. That water is way within the limits used for ag. They just don't want to use it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So another thing they can do is create opportunities for ongoing training through workshops, classes, field trips. You can have facilitate school groups to come and look at how farming happens. You can connect the farmers with outside experts and mentor farmers. You can provide one-on-one technical assistance for farming, like training, and there's often, that could be our staff, but there's also other entities that, like, the conservation district or the extension, WSU extension could probably provide some of those services. We could partner with them to provide some of those services to our incubator farmers. You can participate in markets by hosting a farmer's market, providing a sales outlet on our land, using our marketing to help promote those farms. Establishing like a community supported agriculture, like a box system. We are supporting Woodby Island Grown by allowing them to distribute from their farms.
At no charge.
Here, I don't think we charge for that now. I mean, they just drop off boxes and people pick it up. It's not really, I don't think it's a huge
No,
ongoing staff time.
I did have a question. I may be going back, but the Port of South Whitby owns owns the fairgrounds.
That's right.
That was a vote of the people to approve that purchase, I believe. I'm
No,
pretty sure.
no,
That's,
it was given to them by the county.
But there was a
Yeah.
tax levy on top that the port said, we will not take the fairgrounds unless they pass tax levy
I see.
Right.
to support it, and they undershot it. They don't bring in enough money off that tax levy. Once they dug their heels into the fairgrounds, they realized that they had undersold their own need.
I mean, it was originally used just as a fairgrounds, just a once
Right.
a year for the
Right, I'm
fair.
aware of that.
And then, but that money alone isn't really bringing enough to, the rent for the fair doesn't bring in enough, so they're renting them out to these other entities to try to get it used year round.
So there's a positive financial return from owning the fairgrounds.
I don't think they're
Okay, I
making
don't
money
think
on
so.
the fairgrounds,
Yeah.
governments usually don't make money on their
No,
their
it's
facilities.
the facility that's used by agricultural products and process and all that,
Yeah.
does that provide income to the port?
Yeah, I don't know, or it's something like $2,000 a month or something we're renting for that.
It was modest.
I used to go to their meetings, you know, about that fairground point. Talk about.
Yeah, there's a lot of contention between
Yeah.
the people who want it to just be used as the fair
Right,
and the port, which wants to generate more
And
revenue.
aren't they now developing housing?
No.
well,
They've been
yeah,
trying for
looking-
years.
there's the
I don't know.
RV rental section,
They do have a campground, yeah.
Yeah, they're rebuilding the phase 3 electric in their RV and so forth, which was great. But the fairgrounds itself, they were looking at doing workforce housing above the concession
Yeah.
stands. And that's hitting a brick wall.
county malls, RV rules, building RV parks. And so Port of the South Whitby is kind of in line with where the
Yeah.
county is wanting to affordable housing.
Yeah,
So again, perception, they got a nice big headline, the county. And then there's a Port of South Whitby, at least having what, 6, 8 slots for RVs or whatever. So,
But it's basically, it's thinking of the agriculture instead of the port's not involved in this really. We're just gonna provide this land for people and let farmers farm on our.
why would you say that's not involved by providing land?
Well, not involved in any way except for that. I wouldn't say we're not involved, but
That's
like,
kind of crucial.
we're not doing the, yeah.
And so it's the elephant, to the elephant is,
Yeah,
The land is the
field.
important part, yeah.
and to us, it's like, hell yeah, you know, we got all these projects that we're helping agriculture.
Yeah,
And can I throw one more thing in there?
sure.
Okay, with supply chain being mucked
Mhm.
by all the Washington DC hacking off Canada, Mexico, you name it, you know. I see the need to be resilient as more important, and from the Island Regional Training and Planning Organization, you know, we also know that with only having Deception Pass Bridge, Port Townsend Ferry or Coupeville Ferry, you know, the Mukilteo Ferry, we're at risk that those Cisco trucks may not be able to get on the island some days.
Yeah, helping to develop farm businesses
Right.
is something that benefits the more than just those individual businesses.
It makes us
It's
more
jobs
secure
for
and
the
resilient.
community, it's food for fresh food for the people that live here. That's a value that people want the government to be working on this.
when did Would-Be Grown start?
It started I think in the early mid 2000s, but the food hub project that we're currently doing, the food, it was just kind of a brand that we were allowing. We kind of created this shared brand that different farms could use the brand Whidbey Island Grown to market their produce. But then right before the pandemic started, we were launching this food distribution system where we're gonna facilitate, you know, the online sale of food from these individual farms and then collect and aggregate it and sort it out based on what people ordered and then distribute it. So we've been doing that since.
Yeah, in all my years of living on Whidbey Island, I see that the individual farmer produce being offered at, weekend sales or by order has really grown over time.
Yeah.
And on another page, I remember, I first met you at a meeting in the barn back when the management group was trying to get more money from the port. And one of the options that the port commissioners offered for financial security was to lease the dog area, the Rocky Dog area to Whitby State University that was interested in experimenting on how to make unusable agricultural land, potential agricultural land usable. And they wanted to do experimental crops of some kind. And that was, I mean, people were standing up and shouting.
Because they didn't want the dog park to be
Well,
produced.
they didn't want the university here experimenting.
Yeah.
That's what they were worried
There was
about.
a little element of
Testing
that.
crops,
Huh?
testing different crops or what?
Well, that's just it. You don't know what they're doing.
Well, I'm sure they do.
They could be testing chemicals.
I
Well,
guess.
I
they
mean,
could.
you get enough people together, you're gonna get some
Oh,
extreme views.
It was almost hysterical.
They just didn't trust the university.
Hmm?
They had a bad view of the university.
The Port Commission had been in touch with Washington State University
Yeah,
that has a big agricultural program, and they wanted to experiment. That very word just blew off.
Yeah, it's sort of like, what are those crops that are like
GMO crops.
Yes.
bioengineered?
Yes,
Yeah,
That's what they were gonna be testing here?
well, so that's the fear,
No.
the fear.
Okay,
Well, it didn't get that far.
okay.
It's
Well, I
just
think the
that
view
there was
on
this.
agriculture has changed a little since then.
Well-
I don't know. Everybody seemed very supportive of Whitby Island Grown and local agriculture and this agriculture
Yeah.
committee. The county commissioners think that all the things that those
Right.
entities are doing are a good idea. People don't yell at us.
No, I'm not talking about food. I'm talking about agricultural experimentation. There's a difference when you're talking about a university.
Well, I'm not talking about agricultural experimentation.
No, I know, it is, I know you're not.
Why are
I'm
you
just
bringing it
throwing
up?
that out as an option that was presented at one time and
Okay.
shouted down.
So during this meeting, you know, when they had like a little bit of the chat or Q&A, I threw out there about hydroponics and I got a big,
Yeah,
out of Marion. That they hadn't,
yeah,
that little light bulb had never, you know, it was all like, do it in dirt, do it in dirt, do it in dirt.
yeah. You
And-
can, there's different ways to experiment.
Yes.
On agriculture and using hydroponic systems is generally has a huge upfront cost to build those infrastructure.
But aren't we talking about making the opportunity available to a private business rather than the port getting involved in doing it at the port site?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I mean, the port has not, I'm not aware, it could have happened and I didn't pay attention. But I am not aware of the port ever promoting itself as to any kind of a business potential. It just, the port is, like John has said about the wharf one before it was fixed, a pile of wet wood.
Bathroom break.
Yeah, I will wait for you.
Well, no, you can keep chatting,
Okay,
just.
we won't vote on anything though. It's, the port has, because of lack of funding, people have not been excited about serving as commissioners until now, maybe because of the rehabilitation of the facilities.
Yeah, well, I was excited about serving as a commissioner because of my values around agriculture and the potential I saw from this land.
Yes,
And that excitement is dwindling. Cause nobody else sees that potential, nobody else
I
wants to
do,
put any money in.
I would love to see this farm live up to its name.
Okay,
I would love that.
how do you think we can get there?
I don't have the experience or the training to know, but I know that, the fact that there's animals you can see from the road is a good thing. I just had family come to visit and, boy, the farm's got some animals now.
Yeah,
Now, all these things add up, and the port is not found a way. I don't have a way myself. But other people are a lot smarter than I am when it comes to marketing. And I have been unaware of marketing except for the wonderful events that have been here. The newsletter is a wonderful marketing tool, but the port has to imagine itself in its own mind now that things are fixed and not, as John pointed out in the past, it was just kind of a sad thing and people said, oh, we don't have any money.
that's what you're saying. So
I'm not saying, I'm not making it up. I'm reading the statements. I'm reading the statements that are provided to us. I'm not making it up.
I mean, these things don't necessarily cost all that much money. There is, I mean, compared to a dock.
Yes,
I mean, who
Okay,
benefits
now
from the dock?
you're touching on which should be a higher priority, or
yes,
with
exactly.
limited resources, either funding or staff time. You know, what do we want to see Chris push along
Well, but
every
he won't,
meeting,
but he
or,
won't be here anymore.
well, no, let's talk with it here and now. You know, we got time.
Okay,
We're not gonna solve, 20 years down the road until we, deal with the here and now. But, it's the thing, you gotta look at the here and now, you gotta look at 5 years,
yes,
50 years, if you're really, gonna have that kind of, long-term view. So I'm just saying, this is a good example of, drill down. Chris giving direction to the lady that writes our newsletter. Make sure there's an
She's on the call.
ag article in every newsletter,
that's a good.
so we're not
point.
invisible.
That's a good
Right.
one.
Yeah, I think that'd be a good start, cause it would get people interested in what the port is doing around agriculture, and I think that would.
Interview some of the
Cause the
pea
board
packers,
to
interview
do more.
one little farm. Get some information from each one of these people.
Chris, at one point you said you can't ask people, there's something about the newsletter, they have to go on the website and subscribe, but you're not allowed to advertise that possibility. Is that correct?
The port's not allowed to utilize taxpayer funds to advertise or give any type of benefit to a private individual or a private business. So we can't go on and advertise,
Like Mark's meat, like, hey,
Yeah,
buy these eggs.
right.
But
But-
can you advertise the port itself through its newsletter?
Yeah,
of course, but, you know,
I want more
Yeah,
people to
I see.
get that newsletter. I want
Well-
thousands of people to get that letter, not hundreds.
sure. So, the newsletter is, we started that way back when we did the comprehensive scheme of harbor improvements. That was one of the things, was get marketing out. We had no marketing. Zero. So now we're on 3 different social media sites along with with the newsletter. So the newsletter now is almost 700. We have 600, I looked at it last night, 649 subscribers approximately, okay?
and the open rate is pretty good.
The open rate is fantastic. It's
Okay.
off the charts and way above any national average, or we're in the 55 to 60% open rate and almost as high a click-through rate when there's links. So, but we grew it organically. We didn't sit there and go spam a bunch of people and start sending it out to everyone that didn't ask for it. We didn't want that kind of publicity.
No,
So the people who have our newsletter want it. And we ask them every once in a while, hey, send this to a friend. Have them click on the link at the bottom and sign up. It's very easy to sign up. I know you had a problem with it. I went on the website. I was like, this is easy. It took me 8 seconds. So, and I understand that. Not everyone, has that ability to go on and put a link. But, I got to say something, and I don't know if this because it's a workshop, right?
Mhm.
When I got here, there were were, I think, 6 people in the pea patch. And Dorcas was maybe working her land. That was it. No one else was here. Now we have 6 farms.
Mhm.
So I'm anxious to hear Martin's plan. Not only, I know some of his plan, which is on point, but also the financials attached to that, how to get this land to where the board may or may not want it to be an agricultural powerhouse or an incubator, whatever it is. Because now we have 6 farms, we're gonna have 5, Dorcas is hanging it up. So by the way, her land's gonna be available. So, and I also wanna say just one quick thing is that my direction from this board has been to rehabilitate the Coupeville Wharf #1 and the Green Bank Farm #2.
check.
I would say.
And the Green Bank Farm is not there yet, but if you can see
Previous boards.
previous
I don't
boards.
think I've ever participated in
No,
giving you
previous
that
boards.
direction, so, and I've been here for a year now, so.
No, not,
Well,
that
you
decision
did,
was made by the
Because
previous
it's made by
board.
this board when you guys approved the budget
Yes.
and the capital finance plan.
Well, I mean, their Greenbank Farm stuff that's on the budget is happening right now.
Right, that's what I'm saying, we're doing a lot with a very small group
Yeah,
of people.
Yes.
number one and
You've done an
2
excellent
are,
job.
I thought the way you were saying that was that the number 1 priority was the wharf.
It is, it's been my number
2
one,
priority was.
that's the Green Bank Farm, yeah, that has been my priority.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
just trying
Farming
to
has
set
not
the
ever
record
been,
straight that
Yeah.
that prioritizing the wharf over the farm was something that happened
In a
in
timeline.
previous commissions.
It was a
Not when
timeline.
I was
Yeah.
involved in it.
well, but
Everything I approved, I tried to make it that those were treated equally and one wasn't getting priority over the other.
I think we're confusing priority with timeline. There's only a small staff here and we can't do everything at once anyway. So the money started on the wharf, which was the most visible to the public as being,
it was the most endangered.
yes.
Yeah,
being
but that's
able-
changing, as Martin says, by the end of this year, that wharf will be done, the dock really is a dock, it's not the wharf, it's a dock, and I'm working on it. But now we can shift to the Green Bank Farm infrastructure, and then maybe this opens up opportunities for now farming on this infrastructure, so, you know.
I know, it is what it is, and it is no point in passing it
Yeah.
over anymore. The farm has a commercial kitchen.
Yes, it has a commercial kitchen that is being leased by the Whitby Pie Shop.
Right, and how long is their lease?
Everything's on a month to month right now, cause we're waiting, we got the delegation of authority done, now we need to figure out. What are we gonna start charging lease rates, and right now, I can tell you that the cafe is very under market. And the commercial kitchen is way under market, the rest of the tenants are okay, and we're also in a very volatile time frame right now,
And
so
of
it's.
course, we have to worry that if we get market rates, we don't get applications for the spaces.
Well,
Because
that's
of
kind of the definition of market rate, I guess.
Yeah.
To balance those things.
Because they
Yeah.
say it shouldn't be market rate because this isn't the market location.
If nobody's interested, then the rate is too high.
Well, we are gonna have an opening for the first time, just so you guys know, in this conversation, so Becca's gonna hang it up and go move east. To be with family, and that will be. Rented out at 86 cents a square foot where she is now, that's our cap right now, so.
Well, didn't we change the cap?
No, we didn't, we didn't do anything with lease rates.
But we,
We gave ourselves the permission to charge what we feel is a market rate.
Yeah.
Report, yeah, but we haven't done that yet.
when are we gonna start charging market rates on new tenants?
We don't know what the market rate is. Right now, the last time a board made a decision on this was 86 cents a square foot.
So the board, I thought
We gave him the authority.
yeah, I thought you had the authority and staff
Yeah.
It
to.
says the
to
Port of
determine-
Coupeville has the authority.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right.
Didn't say the executive director, that was taken away from me.
So are you waiting for the board to come up with a specific number?
No, I'm not waiting for the board, in all fairness, it just hasn't been put on the docket yet to start discussions.
But you're saying that there's a new property that's going up for lease now, but we're gonna,
If someone comes in, I will charge the max that the
On a
last four.
month lease.
Uh, if I can, it'll be a month to month, but see, a lot of them need at least a year lease to get insurance.
Right.
But it seems like if it's been a priority to get things closer to market rate, and we have all the permission we need to do that. And we're gonna have a turnover in a tenant, why are we not doing that for the next tenant?
It's just staffing.
Just not time to come up with the number.
Yeah, I mean, we're still, we're painting the wharf building today. There's a lot going on, that's where Mary had to run out. So, we're down to 2 people.
Yeah,
I don't wanna get into the weeds here, you guys have a
Okay.
workshop, but
I'd like to circle back though, you know. I would hope, that, you understand, or that all 3 of us understand. You're just not the Coupeville Wharf advocate, you're just not the farm
No.
advocate. And I'm the free floating, whatever advocate, broadband advocate, that our perspectives have gotta be. All these properties are our properties and we need to manage them equally. And not have a red-headed stepchild kind of attitude about any
Yeah,
one of them.
That's why I try to speak up when there's any talk about something getting prioritized. Like one of those 2 properties getting prioritized over the other, I don't
Yeah,
think
we
doing
can,
that.
we can advocate for favorite projects, but in reality, when we vote, it should be, with equal compassion, equal interest, equal, that we recognize that each asset has value and we don't want to shortchange it.
I think,
I can't say
I
it's
think-
always true.
I think it may have been a mistake to use the word priority with the wharf.
yeah,
I think it creates a mental picture that denigrates the farm as being second rate. And I think it's a question of communication and understanding and vocabulary.
Yeah, that's why I spoke up
Because
when I heard it
the
said, just
wharf-
try to correct
The wharf was in a precarious position, so the first money that came in had to be allocated to projects there simply because it was absolutely necessary to do it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
And I don't call that a prior.
no, the work
the
might
words-
cost more money to
Right,
get it to the place it needs to be.
And words mean
I'm fine
different
with
things
that.
to different
I'm
people.
just, I just don't like saying that one is a higher priority in general.
It was done because it had to be done. And, it isn't as though priority would mean to some people, well, we're going to use gold paint on the windowsills and we're gonna do all kinds of fancy things at the wall. And we're gonna, and that's not what it meant, but it could mean that to some people. So it's all about, boy, communication is hard because the words don't mean the same to everybody.
Yeah. So we're cool. About,
Working.
we all 3 really want the farm to be maximally meeting community needs of the kind that it meets. Which is, ag here, cause you can't do ag at the wharf.
See, my whole thing about having a vote at some point to increase the income of the poor is because we can't be of service to the people if we depend only, based on historic record, if we depend only on rentals to supplement the levy, it hasn't worked so far. And there's a lot of things that have been undertaken as a means to serve the people. On our most recent P&L for the first quarter of this year, I looked at the cost of fuel and the income from fuel, and the difference was $600 for 3 months of operation. Admittedly, winter is slow, but the balance between what we pay for fuel and what we charge for fuel in the first quarter provided $600 of income to the poor. Now, I'm not saying it's bad, it's better than nothing, but it doesn't count the pay for the people who are certified to pump. It doesn't count for all the equipment that we have to maintain in order to.
But there's a little bit of fair market value there. What does Oak Harbor charge for fuel?
I don't know any of that. I'm just looking at, at the amount of effort that has been put into providing fuel sales at the wharf. And I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just saying what it is.
It's not a get rich quick scheme for sure.
No,
Yeah,
but
nothing
it's
we
one
own
of those
is.
things that
Nothing
is
we
not
own
quite paying for itself. That's all. There's a lot of that happens at the port because being of service is the basic theory that the management group had, and that's carries over.
I think one thing, to change the subject, that I think could be beneficial for this commission and the board to, take on is developing like a framework for ranking and scoring projects and initiatives. Developing a kind of a little template where we're gonna take a project, like, we need to redo the gravel roads, you know, and we say, okay, what are the port's values, what's the port's mission? How well does it align with that? How much is it gonna cost? What's the timeline? What are the other, are we getting a lot of community feedback that this is like an important thing to do? And I'm just brainstorming now, we could come up with a more structured, way to score these things, but instead of, for the commission to have a more, structured way to decide on when you have a list of 20 things and I have one thing and you have 0 things, what are we gonna, how do we decide which of those things is important?
Have you really looked at the comprehensive scheme?
Yes, it's right here, I have
Okay,
really looked
which
at it.
has,
At the end.
I find it to be quite general and very open to interpretation.
Yes,
But
thank
it
you.
does list things with
it's
the
supposed to be.
timeline.
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
a short term,
it's
mid-term,
supposed to be.
long term, and $1, $2, or $3 signs,
Right,
yeah,
so
but.
you're suggesting a more detailed version.
Yeah, like when we, some work I've done in the past is reviewing grants for the USDA, and then we get 20 grants and.
They're
we
scored,
have to
they scored.
score them, and they give us this framework of like, we want this grant to align with these USDA values, and how achievable is it, and look at their timeline, see if it's possible,
And-
realistic, so there's not even that much freedom for the reviewer to decide whether they like or don't like the grant, it's so rigid in their scoring process.
Yeah.
We don't have to be that rigid, but I think just having some 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, like, range of how important is this, what's gonna be the community benefit? Is there gonna, like the dock, there's gonna be a lot of community benefit to people being able to use the dock. Maybe it's a risk that it's gonna cause damage if we don't do that, because these docks are floating away and it just needs to be repaired, so that's a high priority for that reason. But having a scoring system,
Let's pick something simpler. Isn't our wellhead up there? Didn't we like not have a permit to use that wellhead, you know, we bring back farm management group, drop the ball for getting.
Oh, yeah,
Water rights.
that's going, yeah, that goes back to 2014, whatever. They
So
never,
then we-
they never finished the permitting.
So is that a project?
No, I've been working on that since COVID broke, when I got the email letter that we were.
So it's a project. You've been doing work on it. You know, just call it the wellhead
Yeah,
project.
we've been taking measurements and so forth, and we've done to do things. Yeah.
So that's kind of important to have water here.
yeah, that's a high priority project
high
that
priority.
doesn't cost much money really, or doesn't involve a ton of.
Time, and
Just some
time is
staff.
money.
Well, yeah,
Well,
but
we're-
relatively, it's less, that
Yes.
it's $1 sign instead of $3 signs.
Right.
I need to break in because you keep using the word grants. And I have a very different skeptical view of grants. Be based on the experience that happened here with broadband and the concept of buying an airport because we can get grants for it. I think that there is a big misunderstanding in the public and among officials as well, that a grant comes wrapped with a ribbon and you get the end result, which is not true at all. The fact that the accepting entity for a grant So you apply for grant and you get it. But someone has to administer it. There has to be an obligation on the part of the port of some kind of time
Matching
and
funds.
effort, even if there's not matching funds. There's time in it, like there wasn't for broadband. But it took an awful lot of time and effort to achieve what we've been able to, what the port has been able to achieve, which bears no resemblance at all to what was described when it was applied for.
We got a grant for the piles and caps, right? That was a pretty significant grant,
Mhm.
wasn't it?
What was
Maybe
the
we-
source?
We got a couple of them.
Yeah,
What was the,
Highland County was the first one, and then,
EB's Landing, didn't they?
no, they actually never gave a grant for that. That's a whole different set of projects that I had them focus on. It's only give me $2,500 at a time. Then we have Dave Paul, who put in another $332,000.
well, the state legislature.
The state, yes,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
state, but it wasn't a match.
and the other thing
Yeah.
people don't realize about grants is they're not checks in the mail. They're reimbursements, and if you
They
accept,
vary, sometimes
you've
they
gotta
are.
have the money
We
to
got money from the legislature, that just comes as money, right?
No, we actually pull from the IDD fund and, pay it, and then we have to turn around and get reimbursed.
Oh, okay.
The same with the broadband too.
So you've expressed your read about grants. Which is a little bit negative, it sounds negative.
Well, I was
I
saying you
understand.
gotta be careful.
You know, your, tail of the elephant,
Yeah.
attitude about grants. I see it as other people's money that's gonna go to somebody. In the area, why not us? If number one, we have the. Matching funds lined up from somebody else, so it's not, draining, current funds. It's a matter of filling out the application. Martin's been doing by his little lonesome, it sounds like, on some of the ag grants. So I'm, more favorable thinking about other people's money, i.e. grants.
I agree with everything you just said. All I wanna know is where does the money come to pay the bills and the time to wait for reimbursement? That's been sometimes in the past a squeeze with the county grants.
Well, let's look at the piles and caps projects. What if we wouldn't have gotten those grants? Would we have been?
You're missing my point. I'm not talking about something that already happened. I'm saying that as time goes on and the value of the dollar continues to decrease and we have ongoing regular expenses at the port, where do we find the money to pay the bills that we have to wait for reimbursement? Where is that extra for a new project?
Well, you
It's
just
in
want
our
to look at
investment
the
account.
process, because the process is kind of what you're
I'm
kind of.
talking about the process, not the value of the end result. I'm saying, great, but they don't pay the bills directly.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look at each grant and each project and make sure that you're gonna be able to fund those.
That's why your
So
scoring
listen,
ideas are good.
Basically, running the port is a pretty complex business, because you're juggling timing, sources,
Yes.
matching funds, the people that actually do the work to fix the roof,
Yeah, when you're living hand to mouth, you don't have necessarily, it's very difficult to come up with that money to pay those
Yeah, if
bills.
you have several $100,000 in the bank or more, you can usually
That's
flood those
right.
things and get reimbursed.
And where do we have several 100,000 in the bank now?
Yeah, we
Yes.
do. In fact,
Yeah.
this may be a better conversation for tomorrow's meeting with
Yes,
Dawn.
maybe
Because the whole idea of getting that first grant for the piles and caps was to build up our investment account. And once I got it up to $500,000 to $750,000, we were able to match and do all these things. Not a problem. Then we got the IDD.
Where did the money come from initially?
Initially, it came from paying off the Green Bank Farm. I had no staff here. It was just me.
Yeah,
I looked at every single service contract that we were under and cut everything and started saving money.
so we do have a reserve
We do. We
that
have plenty
started,
of money to match grants, even without the IDDs. If Martin wants to go out and get, which I fully support, a grant to do a study, because we need a study done,
well,
right? We have matching funds for
if
that.
we had financial statements that made that clear, I
The
would not
balance
have
sheet.
brought it up.
It's on the
It's on
balance.
the balance sheet. Doesn't it
It-
say
it'll-
reserve?
It'll say investment account on
Yeah.
there, and that's our money, it's not IDD money, Mary.
See, I was under the impression that's where the money came from, was the IDD tax that wasn't
There's
spent
two
yet.
separate accounts, there's IDD, and then there's IDD investment. So we have IDD funds just sitting, waiting to be
Oh, I'm
spent.
so happy.
And then we have IDD funds that we actually invested in our investment account because they're getting 2 or 3%.
Right.
We're getting thousands of dollars in interest, right? We
Right.
could easily match a planning grant for
Right.
agriculture.
Oh, I'm
Then we
so-
have our investment account, which is our own money, which started saving in 2018. Then we have our CRNM account, and that's just cash.
Mhm.
That's our money sitting in
Mhm.
there, paying the daily bills. So we have four different accounts with two different funds
Okay.
that we manage.
Thank you for making that clear.
Yeah.
I will have to work on understanding better where the money is and where it came from, because
Yeah.
it hasn't been clear for me.
In general, I think whenever Chris is gonna look at a grant opportunity and
Yes.
decide whether or not we should even spend time applying for it, you know, one of the things he looks at is, okay, is there a match? Do we have to spend this money up front? Do we have the money? And usually they require you to look at that, and they
Mhm.
require proof that you have the funds
Yeah.
to float it before
Yeah.
they'll even consider you for
Yeah.
awarding it. So, yeah, that's a concern, but that's just kind of built into the process.
Yeah, it's built into the process.
Great, because
And they usually have questions that are like, after this grant runs out, how are you gonna be able to sustain this project? Is it gonna, and some projects, like the Captain Piles, it's like, well, that project's done, it doesn't require a lot of staff time to like maintain the Captain Piles. But some projects, like some agricultural thing that's gonna require launching some new initiative, training initiative, obviously, we're gonna need to keep training people after that grant might be over. So you'd have to come up with some text of saying, I've thought of that, and this is where the money in the future is gonna come
Oh, I
from.
really
But that's just
appreciate
part of writing. a
how
grant.
easy it was
Part of
to,
our job too.
Yeah,
So
help
are
me
you gonna
understand.
share your little ag? sheet?
yeah, I can send that to you, yeah.
Cause I think that's, again, just, I want you to be successful being an advocate for the farm.
Yeah, thank you.
We've all wanted farming to be here. One of the first things I said in 2017, I wanted to bring farming back.
Yeah,
I even went to the, what's the county, oh, crap, happens with the pond, Mary. The help with land management,
conservation district.
conservation district.
Yeah.
And of course, that Karen hated the port and wouldn't allow their people to help me basically,
I
but
don't
they,
think she's there anymore.
no, she left a long time ago. But I actually got a couple of their engineers to come in and take soil samples, and I really wanted to get farming back, so, as you can see, so.
And
I
they
welcome the
they
opportunities.
Came out and helped us with the irrigation system.
Many times
agricultural
since
lines.
then,
You
yep.
did a walkthrough last
Yeah.
summer, right?
I'm just talking about in 2017, I really jumped on it, I really wanted to see farming come back. When that lady said that the only thing you can grow here is rocks, that just pissed me off.
And the thing we have to remember, we're also balancing return investment, which would be how much we charge for rent or charge for the pea patch or charge, One Willow Farm versus community benefit, which may be non-financial or community benefit.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
there's that, kind of a seesaw approach that, you don't wanna have One Willow Farm saying, I'm out of here, cause you're charging me
No.
too much to use.
Yeah. And I think those are two things that should be on our scoring
right.
criteria. Is
Right.
what's the community benefit, what's the cost or benefit?
Just as a
financially?
sidelight, there was a man who got a Nobel Prize for his economic description of community benefit being basic for developing the economy. That if you have a good place where people are calm and served well by their governments, it adds to their economic
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah, and to me, that's why I'm such a advocate for replacing the caretaker cottage Because that helps people in the wide community when they don't have enough waiters or waitresses or line cooks because they can't afford to live here.
Mhm.
It would be damn nice to have the type of dwelling that, there could be like 3 or 4 bedrooms. And it'd be no different than like having the wine shop pay rent. To have people renting the caretaker cottage, but they're giving benefit to be workforce for off the farm.
John, renting residential is very different than renting commercial. That's another point, and we would discuss that further at another time.
Well, I think that's part of this meeting, right? Workforce housing. That should be one of the topics on the list. Right now, I've got 2. I've got a tax levy lid lift, possible follow-up on IDD, and then increase our agricultural activity. That's all I got on my list, so.
I think,
You guys might wanna,
I
coming
think
up
we
with your
know each
list.
other better, and I think that's good.
I think coming up with, some longer term financial scenarios. I mean, obviously, we're just making it up, it's just guessing, that's what, every time you're looking into the future, you could say that, and it's obviously harder to look 5 years into the future than it is to look 1 year into the future. We don't even know what projects are gonna be on our list, what's gonna come up. But I think just back of the envelope, gaming out a couple scenarios of future revenue, when's IDD revenue gonna run out? This current one, what are the different possibilities for, if we just let it run out and go with our regular levy, that's one
Yeah.
scenario. Go for a levy lid lift, that's a different scenario, how much? Go for a new IDD, that's another scenario, how much money would we have to cut back on our just general staffing, or we have
yeah,
to cut back on our projects, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be to the penny, but to the $100,000 maybe.
Could we have a goal that the agricultural use of the farm pays for itself? As far as whatever,
Could we have a goal?
allocate expense as far as staffing
Could we have a goal that the dog park pays for itself,
I
Dog park?
love that.
or the walking
The
trails?
walking area, if it paid for itself, we'd have to decide what the cost is.
Could the parking lot pay for itself?
No, well, the dog walking area, which is huge,
Uh-huh.
to figure out what. If it pays for itself, we have to know what the cost is.
well, that's where a study comes in, that's what Martin's been trying to accomplish. Because you only have 21 point something acres, 22 acres for medium impact recreation, that's the only area allowed to be walking dogs. And we have 91 acres of ag. Everyone here's been using over 120 acres, 130 acres out of 151 to walk their dogs. So that's why we need a study. Because if we are gonna bring in agriculture and infrastructure here and make this a viable, at least maybe net zero enterprise, where the port's not losing money on agricultural, then some of that ag land out there needs to be developed, it needs to be harnessed. That means less dog walking area. These are the studies that we need to do.
Yes.
Cause right now, I'm out here and I'm out up here and that's it. And then I have the 7 paddocks, that's all I got. What about the Monroe Triangle? Is that viable for farming? We need studies, that's why the grants that Martin's chasing, I think, are very valuable.
Well, that makes sense.
And I'm not, I mean, to be clear, I'm not necessarily saying we're limited with the land that we have. We have quite a bit of land, and I think we could do a lot with what we have now. I'm not necessarily advocating for taking more of the public trails and using them for farmland, but if that makes sense, I think.
We
We
need to
should
know.
pursue
That's
it.
how it's
Yeah.
zoned.
Yeah, that's true. If you look at the
That's how it's
conservation
zoned.
plan and the conservation easement and the.
Yeah,
The special resource district that we have with the county, it is,
yeah.
we are kind of using more of it for public trails than we were originally allocated, yeah.
So weren't you talking about a wash area where vegetables be washed?
That's right.
Process.
And where was that gonna be done?
That was gonna be part of the study.
That was part of
but,
the first grant.
I've been looking around and it's kind of like. Where the barns, the equipment barn is out there, or in that kind of grassy area as you approach the farms. I think
Yeah.
that could be a.
It needs to be close to power. We do have phase power out here, so it needs to be close to power and a water supply.
Yeah. And ideally close to the ground where the things are being grown.
when they had the organic farm school here, didn't they used to keep veggies right outside the Holly's wine shop in that little hallway? I kind of vaguely remember that.
Eat veggies, like store them?
They have like a sale.
Right from the restrooms, you'd be right outside that wall that had the restrooms, that they'd have some bins for veggies or something.
I didn't even. look.
Yeah, I don't remember. I know that they even to this day will be at Payless and to various places with a table and selling their produce and,
And
yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess the main part of the study was gonna be talking to the farmers and talking to other farm advocates and coming up with plans, specific plans of where these things might be, how much, what's the need and what's the potential.
The entrepreneurial spirit of people who want to get into small garden farming. It seems to be growing in a number of people who are interested in that.
Yeah,
Because we get people who come retired from other professions. And they want to continue to contribute to the community. And that's a way for them to grow and to grow the community at the same time. That's the beauty of farming.
and that's what I'm talking about, is building a little bit of shared infrastructure to make it easier to launch those businesses using our land. We
Yeah.
continue to lease the land and we can lease it below market or we can raise it a little bit. You'll be saddened to hear that agricultural only land doesn't lease very much, even at market.
Which $60 an acre per year.
Right, but even
year.
like, if you wanna go research what the market rate is, it's probably not much more.
No,
Yeah.
Because there's just not,
Yeah.
the value in land is housing, it's not.
Isn't part of the economic development, couldn't it be encouraging new entrepreneurs in the agricultural scheme somehow?
Absolutely,
And,
like training them or just like showing them what's available. Give them a small loan for $500 to get started, or I don't know, there's all kinds of different systems that have been set up, like I said, like. This kind of thing where a government owns farmland is all around the country, like there's a lot of models, there's a toolkit that's like 150 pages describing all the different things you can and can't do. And what, the pros and cons of each of these approaches and how much they cost. It's not, we don't have to invent this, it's already
been done
been
somewhere.
done many times, we can
Yeah.
just pick and choose what's gonna fit for
Now
us.
that the
and do it.
wharf is rehabbed, what goes on there is pretty much set. It's small, we know what it is, we just continue doing it better than we used to. Whereas the farm has growth possibilities.
Yeah,
And I'd love to spend time figuring out how to maximize what we already own in this rather large bunch of acreage.
yeah,
And figuring out what options there are and what they would cost.
yeah,
that's a consultant. We should probably, try to look at writing a grant for .09 funds to come in and bring in a top agricultural consultant and a top real estate developer that can come in and say, this is what you're allowed to do on this property. Here are the limits. Here's how you maximize either agriculture and community benefit versus investment and ongoing revenue.
That's what we need to know. We
That's what
can't
I'm
just
saying,
be-
that should be the topics being in my opinion, should be on the
The
list. of these
idea
things.
that in the past, the port board has just made ideas off the top of their heads without information to base it on is part of the problem.
yeah.
And I don't wanna continue that.
I'd also like to develop kind of some in-house staff experience with, these kinds of things. When other government entities are doing these kinds of projects, they're not just hiring consultants to tell them exactly what to do every time. They have some staff that maybe they have other tasks or, but part of their job is doing these things, just like we have staff that are managing all the other aspects of the port. So like when we're hiring new staff, that's definitely something that I'm gonna be
Well,
looking for.
Chris, haven't you learned, well, you've learned fabulous, but it's been on the job learning, not preparation before you took the job, is that correct? That Yeah, your
There's
skills,
not
my-
an ED school.
Yeah, there wasn't an ED school, so my experience coming in with being able to look at what the goal of an entity is, looking at the current skill sets it possesses and its assets, and then you create a plan to bridge the gap. And sometimes that is derooting and cleaning house, and that's what happened here, right? So as far as going forward, yes, I've learned a lot. I've learned a little bit about everything, but I am not an expert in land management. I'm not an expert in land development. I don't know the laws. I do not know anything about agriculture. So for me to be a consultant in agriculture, you'd just be wasting your
No,
time.
I wasn't,
You
I
know?
didn't, I wasn't trying to say.
Oh, okay,
you
so I was like, how would I do all
I was
that?
talking about maybe other staff, or if we're gonna hire more staff,
Oh, you're talking about like, okay,
admin staff, you know. Or like, for example, I proposed that Mary could go to this, NABC, they call it a Resilierator program, where you can have a project and they'll help you, kind of guide you through it and help you look for funding and do some business planning and stuff.
yeah, interesting.
That was something I emailed you like 2 weeks ago. I think the
Interesting.
deadline is now passed, but developing some in-house experience in these type of projects,
Yeah.
or when we're hiring new people, if there's someone that, you know, like we might hire a new person, and if someone has experience with real estate management or
Grant writing.
grant writing or event, hosting events, and like
Yeah,
running a farmer's market, you know, like, that's the kind of experience that I would see as valuable, or those experiences are valuable, but also someone who had experience working for a government entity that did farm incubator programs and farmer training. If someone like that were to apply to the port, I would be very interested in.
yeah,
talking
sure,
to
I can
them.
see that. Are you talking about everybody? Are you just talking about the executive director as well? Because one of the things that I was looking forward to, and I'm sure Mary was as well, was what was your list going to be, and where was your direction going to be to shape the interview questions and the target and selection of a new executive director?
Mhm.
that
Right.
form you sent of,
Or South Whitby.
That was your job
from Fort
description.
South Whitney
Very
was
good.
very helpful,
Oh, yeah, those are great.
very helpful,
But-
thank you.
And I'm a great believer, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody already
You're so
Right.
good at that.
conceptualized the wheel somewhere out there.
Right.
Yeah,
Thank you so much for that.
That's
Yeah.
how I've learned, is talking to the experts, and then when there was a gap, I had to hire them. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
do
think,
too.
I think we will have to, come up with our plan for new executive director hiring process.
Now, am I correct, you've been keeping a list of the things we discussed today and decided were big topics? Did you have a list?
I have the two.
Just the two still?
That's what I have. I mean, I'm not looking at in the weeds stuff. This is the workshop, so I'm listening to try to
I
figure
mean,
it out.
I've mentioned it like 3 times, but the budgeting, yeah, out into the future, 5-year plan with different scenarios for. I mean, he doesn't wanna do it, so I might as
Well,
well not say it.
It's, no, Mark, I hear what you're saying, man. I'm more of a realist, you know, so I sit down, I wanna budget, I wanna plan. It's really hard for me to dedicate hours and hours and hours to something that are so many factors involved that are killers. Like, but I'm not saying we won't do it, it's just that, how do I come up with a plan? I guess the scenarios, I can draw out a generic scenario. It's like, if we can get a second IDD and we get it, here's a scenario.
Okay, I would say that it's not your job to work out what our things are. I just wanna know what our list is. I'm not asking you to develop them. I just wanna know what they are, because I think we'll develop them.
Here's a suggestion,
Yes,
Chris, using artificial intelligence to try to say to it, do me 5 scenarios of pro forma data, giving these constraints of new IDD approved, a levy lift approved, you know, things like that. Because, you know, right now in my field, AI is kicking butt. You know, and healthcare is very,
Yeah,
very complex.
maybe he can use AI to speed up that process.
Yep.
Sure.
So,
Is that, do you know are you, connected somehow to be able to use ID to do this self?
AI,
Not IDD, you know, AI,
um,
yourself?
every time I do a search now, Copilot
Yes.
gives me my search
But if
results.
you wanted to ask it a question.
I have
Why
experimented.
don't you just ask a question and get the answers? All you have to do is copy them.
I'm,
Why don't you do that?
Okay.
That sounds
I
like
got
you
another
have
one.
experience.
I think I will. That's a good
That's a
point.
good idea.
Because I do see AI as having benefit.
Yeah, I use it.
And so,
It's a quick summary.
Yeah, it's good at summarizing. The other thing I brought
You
up
have to
was,
plug in data.
coming up with a framework, for evaluating projects,
Yeah,
a scoring guide. Is that something you think is a good idea?
I think it's a great idea. I think you're the expert at it though. Cause I'm not trying to pass it off. I've never scored.
Yeah,
I've never been a part of that, but I know that is the program on the
Yeah.
backside of grants. I think it's great that you wanna bring that scoring system to the front side. I'll throw it in there for you to think about is that, the way you explained it was, this is how we as a board could score it, right? Or board and staff.
traditionally, you've just been kind of
Traditionally, we say, do you guys wanna do this?
choosing the projects, and
Yeah.
then you're like, these are the projects I think we should do, and then we're like, go for it.
Go for it, yeah.
And I don't necessarily wanna change that power dynamic, but I
Right.
think it would be a little easier for us if we had, some more, context of,
Yeah.
I chose these projects because this is how they scored on this
Yeah.
rubric, and here you can see the community development. is
Yeah,
really
I
good.
like your idea. What I'm gonna do is try to enhance it. And maybe you should put together a community farm group that could also help the board and the staff score those things. Because you guys represent the community. You have your own interests, which is cool, right? We all do. But you also represent the community. So if you're going out there, you're talking to community, which I know you are, because you're in the farming community. We should be wanting to know what the community wants from those things as well, and have those
Yeah.
people scoring as well.
Well, I wasn't talking about just my farming ideas, I was.
No,
kinda
all the
talking about
ideas.
All
All of them.
like the
Yeah,
dock.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the roof and like.
yeah.
dredging,
Dredging,
Dredging will definitely be one. Everything
Yeah.
else is already in motion, but the dredging,
like, yeah, I guess it's good to go ask the community what they think about dredging,
oh, yeah, yeah. Talk about
how much they
PR.
value that.
if you were gonna think about the voters and taxpayers should be really giving a lot of input. I mean, that would be interesting to actually have routinely survey
Yeah,
just our voters. I don't care if somebody lives over in Bothell, you know, and writes letters to the editor of our newspaper. But it'd be interesting to say, do surveys to say,
what do they
should
value?
the port, pursue dredging at the Coupeville Wharf as a high priority project, something like that,
Yeah.
and see what the people say.
See,
Because I'm thinking too many times, it's only the squeaky wheels,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right,
we
and,
don't have a lot of people sitting in those chairs.
No. So
but the
it's good to
squeaky
get-
wheels are the ones who participate in the surveys. I'm
That's true.
very, very, I don't trust surveys. What I think could happen is visiting these already established groups, community groups, as a visitor with a question and take a vote of the people who show up to the Lions Club or the, or whatever, some way that you are working with people who already are involved. Which gives you, it's still, the best survey is the vote at the polls. And that's why I wanted to do it that way, but in order to get a reasonable response, they have to have information and they have to have clear, concise information that doesn't go on for too long. And then you find out if they would really like to see that happen, whatever you're proposing.
And we're already messaging our voters by way of the newsletter.
Yeah, how many people take it? 600 and something?
For the newsletter, and then we have many more people that are on our Facebook and our
Okay.
Instagram account.
Well, that's one place, that's one
Right.
place to do it.
And each one of us going out and doing our individual face to face. I mean,
Right.
I go to the mailbox, our mailboxes where I live, And boy, if I see one of my neighbors,
Yes.
invariably, now I've got them trained, what's going on at the port?
Right, 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 and everybody I see in every small group I belong to, it comes up. Or I bring it up, but that's still for me, small numbers. And,
That's,
any way
one at
we
a time.
can, any way we can start to, build on what the newsletter is providing us with. I mean, if we're gonna, that's a good place to start.
So I have a question. You know, the term resiliency kind of came up relative to agriculture. That if the Cisco trucks can't make it on and off the island for whatever disaster.
Mhm.
Where does that or agriculture, does that agriculture fit under economic development totally?
Talking about emergency preparedness for like
Sorta,
a major earthquake or something that took out
Yeah.
the bridge.
yeah, the big one, the
And then you're trying
Cascadia.
to decide if the agriculture on the island is
Can,
sufficient to
can we feed
us
ourselves
in
for
number
a
of
little
days.
bit by having better ag
No
here?
way, no way. You're better off going to Costco and getting a 300 ml dehydration pack.
Yeah,
If I'm a farmer like Martin and I'm taking the crops and my food and I'm gonna feed my family for that.
you know, if the military is not held dropping like
Right.
pallets of MREs,
Right.
no.
Right. That's exactly right.
So then I'll back off resiliency and just have,
I mean, people talk about that, but realistically, no,
Realistically,
yeah.
like 80,000 people and like
Yeah.
whatever amount of, like, it's also mostly vegetables, so it's like, what is that,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
so
But
you're,
maybe, we do have, you know, like Whidbey Island Growing has a 10 by 10 freezer and pallet storage and, walk-in coolers and a refrigerated truck, and so some of that agricultural infrastructure can be used in the distribution of food
Yeah.
and the storage of food, short time from, you know, like if FEMA calls and they're like, we need to get something done, then you can use that local infrastructure to assist.
so how would you characterize your ag projects? Are they living wage workforce?
It's economic development is what I see it. It's business incubation.
Okay.
And it has, you know, other benefits to the community of, you know, people value eating with local food that's grown in the
Okay.
community. And then, yeah, providing, those are jobs, that's what economic development is, but.
And yeah, I think we have established, you know, that, you know, we're charging rent to One Willow Farm, we're charging rent to the pea patchers, we
Yeah,
charge rent to the hoop. house
growing
people.
veterans, would be on down.
Well, we didn't charge rent to growing vets. We worked out a deal where if they inputted $2,500, because the rent is so cheap,
Yeah.
and reconditioned the hoop house,
I see,
we
That
gave
was
them 5 years
you know, in lieu
of
of
farming.
yeah,
An exchange of services, what it's called.
yeah.
So they can get in with no barriers to entry, really.
But yeah, I think we have 6 or 7-ish agricultural tenants.
And so, you know, we are getting some revenue, you know.
Yeah, I think it's $50, what'd you say, $50 an acre per
We,
year?
we charge $60 per acre per year, and then a $25 one-time water use fee.
Per
Is what
year.
we charge now, per year. Not much. And then Dorcas's land is a little bit more because it's still kind of certified organic, because there's a fence around it. All this has lost its certification because there's no fence around it.
But the total annual revenue from those agricultural leases ballpark is gonna be what, $500 to $1,000?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah,
Is that what you're asking?
annually, yeah.
Better than nothing.
Yeah,
Yes, 500 to 1,000, we don't have to get from a tenant.
I mean, it
from like
probably
Holly or the
goes
place.
towards the costs of maintaining those properties, but, you know, the
Oh,
gravel
and
road's
once
gonna
we
be a lot
get
more than that.
meters, once we get water meters and electric, they
No water meters, we couldn't, no one will touch
can't
it.
do that?
Nope, we tried. The town's like, the county's like, no, we don't do that. We don't have a town in Green Bank.
Or you can't find somebody to do the work?
Went to the plumbers, they're like, nope, we don't do water meters. No,
Well-
we're done with the water meter.
There's water
Electric, we're getting that fixed as we speak in part A. We're gonna start charging electricity for what's being used, but as far as agricultural. And water meters.
So since you're not big on surveys, what's an alternative way to be a more formal collection of data about what the voters think we should be doing?
Well, I'm not against surveys because you explained how to use them better.
Yeah.
And I don't think we need to get fancy and more formal. We need to become as informal as possible to involve people who finally understand that this is not a club and we are actually paid to do work. Many people are still of the opinion that the port is just
How do you
sort
know
of
that?
off to the side something.
How big a many?
Mhm.
How big a many? When you say many, is that like 90% of people?
Everybody I've talked to about the port, that's where it started, so I'd say over my lifetime here, 100.
So out of 6,000 voters.
Right,
in
well,
Central-
if we only had a local TV station, you could go on and become the expert on local government.
Why isn't Survey Monkey like a free survey tool, Survey Monkey?
Yeah, it is.
You can utilize a free version of it. If you wanna get into data and analytics, then you're gonna be paying, but it's not that expensive.
See, I'm out of the loop on social media, I don't do any social media, but I realize that puts me off to the side somewhere. People who do social media regularly, that's another source to spread the word.
Yeah. Social media's got really bad, really, ugly.
Do we have more topics to discuss here?
I don't think John.
I'm thinking that tomorrow's meeting is, the business part of it is very short, so if there's anything occurs to any of us that we want to reinvigorate this conversation, which I think has been very, very helpful. I think when we get to commissioner discussion tomorrow, if you have something you'd like to bring up, that would be the time to do it, because I think I've sort of used up my energy this morning. Yeah, we've been here for 2 hours and I think we've accomplished a lot.
Yeah.
Our-
And we can always have a little commissioner discussion, maybe sleep on something
Well,
and.
If
Yeah,
there's
we have it
something you
tomorrow.
wanna bring up or clarify, I think tomorrow would be a good time for a short addition to this.
Mhm.
And we can decide if and when we wanna meet again.
Okay, you wanna adjourn the meeting?
I think we're finished, this meeting is adjourned.
Okay.